All right, we're back. We are COMP305 in the fall 2019 semester at Centennial. This is part 2. We're talking about a bit of Unity. You guys have some Unity experience from COMP391 for the most part, most of you. So during the break, what we did was we formed up teams. Again, we did something similar earlier today. And of course, now we are getting into the kind of the technical part. So we're going to be using a couple of tools, and in order for us to do stuff, we're going to use the Unity game engine. Again, I'm going to assume that some people don't know it because you could have come from different courses to come here. You don't have to be a game developer or even in interactive gaming, right? So where it says get Unity for all, Unity again is a game engine. This is not a Unity course though, so one thing to note again. This course is about how to use a game engine to create a 2D game. We're just happen to use Unity. We could easily use Unreal or something else that's out there. And again, as game developers, I think it's good to know both these days. Unreal is better, it's closer to Snowdrop, let's say, on the Ubisoft side. And Unity is not like that. It's also good to know C++. Okay, so as we go down, we want to use personal, and when we say get started for free, it's going to take us to this page, and it says, who are you? Are you a new user or experienced? We're going to go experience. We're going to go click go here. It's going to take us to accept terms, and then you're going to download Unity Hub. After you finish downloading Unity Hub and installing it, let's run it. Now you should have Unity Hub on your machine. I just want to get you guys to the same version of Unity that I'm using, and so let's go to installs on the left. So right now, I've installed Unity version 2019.2.4 F1, right? So that's the one I want you all to use this semester. So if you have a previous version of Unity, there's two things. You can uninstall it, or you can leave it there. Sometimes it takes up quite a bit of space, like upwards of 5 gigabytes. I don't think there's any need for you to keep that on your system, right? Unless you're using it for something else. One thing to note is when you install Unity, I want you to install it with the following: Universal Windows Platform Build Support. We may not use that this semester. WebGL build support, we will be using that this semester, as well as Windows build support, the IL2 CPP version. So those three things. You don't need documentation, you don't need iOS or Android support, and you don't need any kind of VR support for now. So those are the three things I'm looking at. Okay? Again, if you don't know where to find that, you can click Add on Unity Hub, and under Unity Hub, you can see that version, 2019.1.14 F1. Is that the one I loaded in? 2019.2.4 F1. Sorry, I'll be okay. This one is the one that you want to use. All right. Now, the reason why it's bringing this up is because mine's already been installed. In the future, what might happen is next week somebody else might come in, and if you're one of these people who are watching the video, and next week the version changes and this 2019.2.4 F1 is not available, you can certainly choose the download archive. In the download archive for Unity, you're going to see every release, right, over the last several years. All of 2019, all of 2018, and so on is all here, and you can add it to Unity Hub, and from there you can install it, okay? But the importance of working with Unity 2019.2.4 right now is so that everyone's on the same page. Otherwise, what's going to end up happening is there might be something that doesn't work on your system if it works for one of your partners and so on, and that would be bad. So are you all with me? Do you have 2019.2.4 set up already? Or are you installing? Universal Window Platform, Windows support, and WebGL. Those are the three things I want you to put in. Please don't install Android or anything else. And you don't need documentation. Please don't include documentation in your build. It'll take too long. Okay, so again, while you're doing that, I want to talk about your account. In order for you to do Unity at all, you need a Unity account. And you can certainly set that up for free. If you look here on the top of Unity Collab, there is this account info stuff. Take a look. If I click Account or go to Developer Dashboard, let's go to Developer Dashboard for a second. So if I go to Developer Dashboard, you may or may not see something that looks like this. So for the last little while, I've put in a bunch of projects up online. And the reason for this is because I've been working with VR. I've done several projects with our Department of Nuclear Energy at the Ontario Tech University, right, where we actually made a VR project to visualize radiation. So that was cool. So we made something called Marvin, and that's what that was the main Unity project. But then from there, we made our own haptic glove in the summer, so we can actually feel the radiation. We used Arduino technology, open microcontrollers, basically to create that. And we also used the VRTK framework in order for us to get some interactions. Over the summer, we worked with Oculus Go, Oculus Quest, and Oculus Rift S, right? In comparison to that with Vive, just to give you kind of some insight, I'd say right now Oculus S is probably the easiest thing to use. Oculus Quest, even though it's tetherless, is still an Android device on steroids. So that's where we sit with that. But you can see here, the point I'm showing is there's a bunch of projects here that you're going to see, right? Tons and tons of projects. And what you're going to do is you're also going to see this, COMP305 F2019 Lesson 1A from this morning, right? So what we do is we can create a cloud project, and then you can share things through Unity Collab. Unity Collab is by far the easiest way to collaborate with other people when it comes to your scenes. Normally your Unity scenes are atomic, and what I mean by that is once you make a change to that scene, or if you make a change to the to GitHub, it basically destroys any changes that your partner made on the same scene. Whereas in Unity Collab, that's not necessarily the case. So I think this is a great way of working together with others. Okay, who's still installing Unity? There might be a couple people left. All right. One thing to note also is that in your organization, so again, you have your account, and if you look at account itself, right, one thing you can see is I can look at all my projects like I just did, right? If I look at that project, if you click on your projects, you might see yours. Here's the project that I worked with earlier today. You can see that analytics and collaborate were turned on, and under settings on the project itself, I included an additional user, one of the students from our class, Natalia, right? And from here, what you can see is I'm the primary user, and Natalia is also a user herself, and what I can do is I can collaborate with her right within the Unity toolset. Okay, here I'm going to remove Natalia. I can do that as well. I have that kind of flexibility, where I can delete her as a user. And what I can do is I can look at Unity teams themselves. If I go back to my developer console, here's I go to account. You can see that I can look at all of my seats. Here's all the seats that I have. There's two types of ways of using Unity Collab. One way is Unity Personal, where you can use up to 3 people can share their Unity together, up to 3. Now, how is that going to work with you guys if you guys got 5 or 4? You could break it up in groups of 2 if you really wanted to. You can have the same project. Now, the problem with this is integration. How do I integrate more than this? And where it becomes more realistic is if the group buys Unity Teams Advanced. Let me explain this for a second. And by the way, I don't work for or am affiliated with Unity. All right, but I'm telling you this because the easiest way that I've found from a professional perspective to work with Unity. So here I have a number of seats. You can see that I have 0 seats available. By default, you will also have 3 seats available. And if you want to go beyond this point, the total cost per month is about $10 a month. So you can have about you can go beyond 3 seats, and it'll be like $7 for every user. So again, you can spend a little bit of money and have everybody on your team, or in the case of us here in the class, what you can also do is I'm just going to revoke her seat there. There we go. In the case of a class, what you can do is you can simply just have more than one collab going on. So now, just because you're using Collab doesn't mean you're not going to use GitHub. GitHub is the ultimate backup, and you're going to share your project through GitHub and back it up and use version control on GitHub as well. I think both systems work very well together, and so I do recommend them. And again, over the last year or so, we've been doing it successfully with one of our teams out in Ontario Tech, and I think it really worked well, so I highly recommend it. So that's Unity Collab. I'm going to show you the workings of that in a bit. But let's get back to our Install. I'm guessing by now most of you have done the install. Yes, I know it takes a bit of time. So let's launch Unity. So again, what I want to do is I want to go to Projects, and I want to click New Project. Under Projects, again, there's some options. I want to go to 2D, because that's the project we're going to use. Notice also that I put in my Unity projects under C, Users, Tom, Desktop, Unity Projects, where I put my stuff. Please don't put it in some random spot where you can't find your project in the future. And then let's call this project by name. So it's going to be COMP305 in the fall 2019 semester, and it's lesson 1B. You guys are the second team, so I'm going to make it 1B. I'm going to create this. Okay, so let's talk about the difference between 2D and 3D. Some people don't know that, so bear with me as we talk about this. This is some overlap with COMP391. So think about 2D and 3D. What's really the difference? Yes? Okay, but what's the difference in Unity, do you know? Do you only have two axes in Unity? Do you only have X and Y ever in 2D? And the answer is no, actually. You have three axes. You have X, Y, and Z even in 2D. And I'll show you it right here. By the way, you might see your layout that looks like this. Let's talk about Tom's Pro layout for a second. So normally you would see something that looks like this. You have something that looks like the default layout, like this. To me, this is a crappy layout, all right? And let me talk about why. The real estate here is really terrible when it comes to working. Now, I'm going to let you work however you like. I'm not going to be a Nazi when it comes to layout, okay? But let me explain why I think other layouts might be better. First of all of these tabs, as you may or may not know, are all terrible. Like, not terrible as in bad, but you can tear them off, like movable, if you will. All right? So one thing I'd like to do is initially start with something like a 2x3 layout. So if you go to default, this layout, and if you go to 2x3, it'll start you off like this. So this could be a starting point. The other starting point that you can also use is the tall layout, which I also like. Okay, so here's the tall layout. In fact, let's start here. And let me explain why. One, you have way more real estate in here. For the most part, I'm not going to look at both my game and my scene at the same time when I'm developing. If you do, you can always pull this down over here if you want to use that temporarily, and then put it back if you're working more with your game rather than your scene. Okay, that's the number one reason. The other thing is, I don't want to take all kinds of space up with my hierarchy. I'm not going to see a lot of things in here initially, and I'm going to focus on my assets here as well, so I can bring my assets up or lower if I want to. One thing I don't like to see is I don't like to see an icon for my scenes. I want to bring that down into a list, so I can drag the slider so you can see a list in here. And this way, I'll maximize my my real estate by bringing this across. So this is kind of my pro layout. The only thing that's missing is the console by default. So again, you can go to Window, I can go to General, and then Console, and then you can bring up the console where you can attach it over here. Let me explain why I put it over here compared to here. Well, when I run this thing on this window, in this viewport, then I can certainly see my console, and I can see if there's any errors or anything else that comes up. So that's why I do it this way. I still like to keep my inspector over here, and that's totally fine. But what I'd like to do is save my layout, because you can go to layouts, and then you can save your layout. And I've already made one. I've called it Tom's 2D layout. You can call it whatever you like. But this way, you can save your layout so you can use it again. Again, I want you guys to work in the most comfortable way possible. So if you don't like this layout, and if you think another layout's more efficient for you, you make it. Okay, so here I'm going to go to Tom's 2D layout, which is the one that I made. There we are. It's almost identical to this one. In fact, it's almost the same. One thing I've added in is the asset store, which I like to have open as well, right? And again, you can add in as many of them or as little as you want. If you're a minimalist, I know some people don't have like any of these hidden windows and they want to add them in on the fly, and that's totally fine as well. Okay, so now that we have our layout, let's explain a little bit about 2D. You said you were talking about how 2D you only have X and Y, and yes, you only see X and Y, but in reality, if you click this little 2D button, you actually see that we're really in 3D. And what's happening is with the camera is projecting this long field. One thing to note is, again, if I want to hold down the middle mouse button, I'm using a 3-button mouse, which I highly recommend for using Unity for navigation. Again, if you use the middle mouse wheel, you can pan around. If I use the right mouse button, hold and drag, you can certainly orbit or rotate. And then if I use the right mouse button followed by any of the WASD keys, for example S, you can use them as first-person controls. So you can kind of fly through your entire scene, which is kind of cool to me. If you want to go faster, you can use a Shift key just like you normally would in your any kind of FPS, right? Which you should be comfortable with. And then the E key takes you up, and the Q key takes you down. Right? Again, this is all while holding the right mouse button. So that's why it's important to have a 3-button mouse. But take a look at this. You have this camera, and you can see that what the camera is looking at is way far away. And what this is you have two parts. You have the near plane, which is this part right here, and you have something called the far plane, which is way on the other end. Near plane and far plane. And inside the middle, you have this frustum, which is what's going to be described or drawn by the camera. Anything outside of this is going to be in the game world, but just not rendered. Okay, so that's important to know. A better way to describe this is using Blender. Let's take a look at Blender for a second. So I'm going to bring up Blender 2.8, which I think is a good demo tool for this. And again, if I zoom in with Blender, it's got similar kind of functionality in terms of panning and rolling and all that kind of stuff. Again, I've applied Blender's 2.79 keys to 2.8, so that's easier for us to transition. But you can see here that I've got a camera view, and I'm seeing this cube in perspective, right? If I switch to orthographic mode, right, you can see that the cube looks a little bit flatter, right? But actually what's happening is the camera is changing its frustum. And let me talk about that a little bit. So here you've got the cube, and if I duplicate the cube by pressing Shift D in Blender and putting along the y-axis, just slide it along the y-axis, and I change perspective, you can see that this cube here appears to be smaller than this one, but actually they're the exact same size. And this is how our eyes work. Our eyes work in terms of seeing things far away, and so what's happening is we're translating a 3D space on a 2D screen. And this is great. Perspective looks nice. But really, if I switch it to orthographic, now we see that both things appear to be the same size, no matter where you look at them, right? And that's what's really happening with 2D. It's moving from a perspective camera to an orthographic one, okay? So what does the perspective frustum look like? Let's use this one, all right? So if I right-click on this one and go into edit mode, and let's do a couple things here. What I can do with the cube, as an example, is I can scale down the initial face. Because typically what's happening is, when you're looking at the camera, where the camera's position is compared to where the near plane starts, if there's a bit of separation, anything closer to the camera than the near plane is not rendered. Anything farther from the camera than the far plane is also not rendered. And anything outside of this frustum here, outside and the rest of the world, is also not rendered. So the only thing that the camera does, is render anything that's inside of this volume, right? And the rest, I'm just going to move this around, so I'm going to say G across the x-axis here, and let's move this way over here, and then just maximize this out. Let's just scan it out. Oops, there we go. You can see here that this is kind of like what the camera is doing, a perspective camera. It looks like this, and that's what you're going to see with the camera. This is the volume. Whereas in a orthographic camera, going back to this cube here, and I guess I'm just going to pop out of here into edit mode and back in, you can see that as I'm grabbing those points, right, that when I expand this the same way it's done in Unity, this being the near plane, this being the far plane, as an example, you can see that it's a totally different shape. But that's what it looks like. This is the perspective camera, and this would be your orthographic one. And this has an impact in terms of how we perceive the 2D world. So the reason, going back to Unity, where if I click back 2D, it looks like this, it's actually not flat. It's just not caring about the depth at all. There isn't, it's almost like the depth value for the Z is being ignored. Okay, but it's actually, you're actually doing things in 3D. The other thing to notice is the difference in between Unity and Blender in terms of the way it's handling its axis in its addressable space. One thing, if you notice, is that on the Z-axis, Z is up for Blender, right? But in Unity, it's actually Y up. And it does that both in 2D and 3D. Here's the Y-axis. You can see that. Now, people always ask me, why do you think that is? How come they did, Y up as opposed to Z up? There's different, I guess different applications do it differently, but one of the reasons I could possibly discern is, hey, you know what, we have two modes in Unity, a 2D mode and a 3D mode, and maybe the folks at Unity thought, well look, in 2D we're only going to care about X and Y, and if we were to switch this around, and it would be like X and Z, and that would be kind of really weird, so let's do X and Y. Maybe that's the reason why they did this, right? But it's funny that Unreal uses Y up as well, so it's kind of interesting. But this is definitely a change, and so please note that in Unity, the axes are a little bit different. The other thing is that, take a look at the far plane here. Remember that all objects that we see here in Unity are game objects. Every single object, including the main camera. Every game object by default has a transform component with position, rotation, and scale. That's just a default. And if you notice also, there's a camera component that comes in here. When we say component, it's because Unity has been designed with a whole idea of an entity component system, where you have multiple components that are pluggable onto a game object. Okay, so that's how it's done. So take a look at this. So the frustum, this is the clipping plane. The stuff that's outside of the clipping plane, outside of this 0.3 meters to 1,000 meters, is not drawn. Does it make sense that we should have 1,000 meters? Think about it. We're doing 2D. Why 1,000 meters? I recommend let's take this right back down to 100 meters. Even 10 meters might be okay, because we're never going to go that deep, guys, ever. Unless you have some weird effect where you want to zoom from this view over here to this view down there. There's no need for it. And this takes up cycles. All right? So, again, that's one of the things I would change. Also note that all cameras have one audio listener. And let's also see something else. We have this viewport rect. What the hell is that? What is a viewport rect? Does anyone have an answer for that? Well, let's take a look. We have W and H. Can we use intuition to understand what W and H is? What is that? Width and height. Okay, and then X and Y, right? Well, why is width and height 1? That's weird, right? Well, I want you to think about this as normalized components. What that means is they're numbers that have been taken from 0 to 1, where 1 is 100% and 0 is 0%. And all the points in between ramp up in terms of percent. So if we think about this, if these numbers are normalized, that means that width is 100% of the screen, right? And height is 100% of the screen. So if I wanted my camera to be a quarter of the screen, I could simply change these to 0.5. Let's do that. So 0.5 and 0.5. What do you think, before you check, don't check, what do you think that the game would look like? What do you think, how big do you think the camera is going to look on the game itself right now? And where will it be positioned? What do you think? Don't look. Cheating is looking, right? Any idea? Where do you think the camera is going to look? If you look at the entire viewport, there's still 100% of the viewport, except we're only looking at half the viewport from a width and height perspective. How does it look?
Is it going to be the center, but like,
No. It looks actually like this. Good try, though. It's like this. So let me take a look at this. So here we have only 1/4 of the screen, and again, you'd be forgiven to think that X and Y would be at the top left corner where people think it should be, because that's how normally we draw in computers. We draw across and down, and usually the top left corner is 0, 0 point. But actually, for Unity, it's the bottom left corner. So the bottom left corner of the viewport, this is what the player will see, is what this represents. So what if, okay, so knowing this then, if this is the 0, 0 mark, and if I want to put it up over here to the top right corner, I want to move the camera to over here, just to display or render in this addressable space up here. How do I do that? What do I change here in my viewport rec to do that? Any ideas? Okay. X and Y to? Wrong. If it's 1, that would be off screen. Yeah, 0.5, right? Because if I move this to 0.5, look at this. If I move this to 0.5, it goes to the right, right? If I made it 1, it'd be off screen. One whole viewport, right? One whole viewport, not half a viewport. So it can't be more than 0.5 in this particular case, because our width and height is 0.5. If I made it 0.25, then I'd even be able to make it smaller, right? And then if I move it to 0.5 again, you can see that I can move that renderer up. So why am I showing you this thing? Because there's going to be a point in our game later on where we do a mini-map. And in order for us to make a mini-map, we can use multiple cameras to do that. And you can display different cameras in different sizes. So for example, I can do it like this. If I wanted to, I can make it even smaller. So let's suppose I made my width 0.25 and 0.25. You can be really creative. with how you put this in. This is, you can move the place where your camera is rendering the image that it's looking at anywhere on the viewport, which is kind of neat. Here's another use case. What about if I went back to what it was? Let's take a look at this. So here's my camera, but instead of it being only half a height, I made it whole height. What does it look like now? So here's my camera, but it starts off at, instead of 0.5, I'm going to go back to that 0 point, right? You can see now I got split screen. So if I wanted to play kind of co-op split screen this way, I can do it this way. I can have one camera over here rendering, I can have the other camera over here rendering, which we're going to probably do in this course as well. And especially if you choose to do the tank game, this is one way of doing split screen. I'm not sure who likes this way of doing split screen compared to like split screen above and below. I don't like split screen at all personally, but if you have to do multiplayer co-op, like couch co-op, I'm not sure. I kind of like this way a lot. People don't like it. People like the other way where it's stacked one on top of the other, which would be a width of 1 and then a height of 0.5. So kind of like this. So like that kind of split screen. This? Yeah, I find that too. I don't know which screen I'm looking at sometimes when I'm playing the game. I'm like, God damn it. Am I the bottom player or the top player? Sometimes I lose track, right?
I remember playing NFS on PlayStation 2 and we're playing split screen like this.
Yeah.
And for a second I looked at the wrong screen.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And so to me it's the same thing. I've played Borderlands with couch co-op as well, and there's a couple of games that allow you to do split screen in different ways. Some of them don't give you a choice. I'm always for choice for the players. User experience is the most important thing when it comes to game development to me, and fun. You can make it functional but not fun, like we talked about. And to me, you should give the option for a person to split screen the way they want. Okay, but to me this is not comfortable. I like it the other way around. For now though, let's put it back to what it is. One person asked this morning, what about if I have two cameras? I'm going to have two audio listeners, and if you're doing couch co-op, which camera do I put the audio listener on? Because Unity's going to complain. And that's true. It's going to complain because you can only ever have one audio listener in the scene. So where do you put it? And the answer is it doesn't really matter if you're doing couch co-op because you're listening from the same viewport, the same display is playing the sound, and so it doesn't matter, right? But in reality, if you've got multiple players playing multiplayer, then each player camera is going to have its own listener because it's going to be only rendering to that display. Okay. So again, clipping planes 0.3 and 100. I recommend something there or even smaller. I think that's pretty cool. Notice the background is this blue color, and normally in a 3D view, the camera would have a skybox. We don't have a skybox here, and our culling mask is everything. The culling mask everything, this is more like a filter. So anything that you see inside the culling mask means that these are all the different layers that are going to be drawn in Unity. So has anyone drawn with layers in Unity? Probably. Oh, yeah, you have? Great. So what that means is that you can have different layers that are going to be rendered, and you can decide when to show certain layers and not show other layers. You can also make sure that your light casts on some layers but doesn't show on other layers. And so layers are really, really awesome because what you can do is you can stack layers one on top of the other to create awesome little effects. Okay, so here, in this case, it's showing everything. Nothing is being ignored. So all of this stuff is being shown with our camera. In this particular case, the default camera. We talked about Pro Layout, and we talked a little bit about the camera. Let's go back to our scene for a second. Let me just put it back to 2D so you can see that that's there. And you can see that by default, this is the way it's been rendered. Notice also that the size of the viewport is 5. What does that mean? What is size 5? What do you think that can mean? What if it was size 1? What if it was size 25 or 100? What does it matter? Why is that? What does that size mean from an orthographic perspective? So it's like it says here, the vertical size of the camera view. So that's in meters. So what it's actually doing is it's making the camera view bigger, right, than normal. You can make it even bigger than this, and you can match the vertical size. If you wanted to make a 1-to-1 pixel perfect kind of view, you would change this vertical size, and we'll see that later on when we go pixel perfect. Anyone else ever do a pixel perfect kind of game? There's reasons for it, right? Some people say never do it. Don't do a pixel perfect game because what's going to happen here is your viewport is going to scale anyway. And even when we bring in textures here in Unity, what ends up happening is like 100-to-1 if you bring in a texture, if you ever noticed that. And we'll talk about that as we bring in textures. But here's something to note. Our scene is called sample scene by default. I want to change that. So I'm going to go into scenes and change this to main. That's how I normally start off. Conventions we're talking about now. I'm going to reload. And also, if you notice in assets, I have scenes. I don't like this. I'm the type of person that likes to have scenes with an underline, underscore. So I'm going to rename this scene or the folder to underscore scenes. That's just me, right? I also like to create other folders as I go. So when I create my Unity project, I organize my entire folder structure from the get-go. So again, I'm going to right-click and create a new folder. I'm going to call this underscore scripts, because that's where I'm going to have my, if I can actually spell it properly, scripts with one T. Because I want to have my scenes and my scripts at the top, because I usually deal with those a lot. Okay. The rest, though, here are the rest of the folders that I'm going to have. I'm going to have materials, so create new folder materials, because basically I'm going to have all my materials in this folder. And I'm also going to have another folder for textures. I love that sound that's going to be recorded live on YouTube right now. Sorry for people watching live on YouTube, but there are people doing construction here for some reason. It's annoying. And let's keep going with the folder structure. Let's create an audio folder. Here's our audio folder. So audio materials. Notice it's going to happen in alphabetical format, but the underlines or the underscores, what they do is they bring these two folders to the top. Audio materials textures. If you have 3D models, if you have 3D models, you can put that in too. And I will bring in 3D models because you can use 3D models from Blender, and as long as you render them, I'll be right back, in 2D, right, it'll look like it's 2D. The only thing with 3D models, keep touch is, what's the problem with 3D models? What's the problem with using 3D models in 2D? There's a problem. I got to talk about this. Yes. For our little whatchamacallit, projects, the answer is no. But if it was lots and lots of enemies or something crazy, then the answer would be yes. It would take long to render. But actually, the problem is lighting.
I didn't get that.
Yeah, the problem is lighting. That's what I said. All right. So that's what it is. It's when it comes down to it, right? When you bring in a 3D model in a 2D world in Unity, it's going to be black, and the reason why is because it's unlit. Okay. So we have to consider that. Now, the great thing about bringing a 3D model in Unity, and even if it's black, and we have to light it, is you can create really cool lighting effects in 2D, which can make it interesting. So models, textures, audio, materials, those are the basics. You can certainly add other things like animations and other folders that you want in here, but I try and create as many of them as I can think of beforehand, because I want spots for everything to go. Here's something, what's really missing here that's really important if you're doing Unity. There's a folder that's missing that I like to use. Anyone have an idea? Animations can, let's add that in, sure. But I don't think we're going to do it right now, but sure, why not? Animations. What else? What else would you add in that's more critical than animations? Sprites, I don't know, again, it depends. I might put that in textures and have a subfolder of sprites. It depends on how you work and what your team decides. Again, these are all conventions that I think you guys should work out with your team, right? So that way everyone has the same way of doing things. One of the worst things for me is when everything is in the root of your assets folder. I've seen teams like that. I'm like, I'm going to blow my head off, right? It's like really terrible. And some other people like to actually put all the materials, textures, and scripts for every model in its own folder. And I don't agree with that either, because then that means your script's all over the place. And this way I can go from one script to the other. Yes? Well, this is the assets folder, right? So this is the assets folder, right? So, but prefabs are missing, right? That's what I would say. Prefabs is a kind of a folder that we need, so I'm going to put that in there. Prefabs. It's a special folder for Unity. Unity likes putting stuff in prefabs. Again, some people like to have a prefabs folder, and underneath each prefab, or with each prefab, have its own set of stuff. So that way you can easily export everything afterwards as an exportable package. Have you guys done packages before? You can, yes, you've done, so you've exported packages. It's really useful, especially when it comes to things like, if I have two collabs, I'm running two collabs at the same time, and I create maybe one group works on scene 1, another group works on scene 2, and you have two different collabs and they don't clash with each other, but I want to take my scene 2 and export it and import it into the the other project, so there's both. You can export it, and then what people like to do is they like to put all their stuff kind of atomically together in prefabs where they have materials and textures and everything in there. I don't know. I'm more of a person that likes to work like this. So it's up to you how you want to work, but this would be my layout. That's how I work. Okay, I want to show you Collab because, you know, part of what we talked about before is Collab is really, really powerful. How does it work? So notice on the top over here, I've got this Collab button. I also have this little cloud button, but the one I'm worried about here is this Collab button. So what I want to do is, when I'm in Collab, I want to start now. I want to click the Start Now button. And what this does is it creates a project that I can share with others. So notice on the right, it tells me what's my organization. For me, I'm just going to use me. And I'm going to click Create. And what this does is it actually creates a space for my project online. However, I'm not sharing yet. In order for me to share, I got to go back down where it says Collaborate and click on this little button. When I click this button on, now you can see that it's going to churn a little bit. Unity is going to go through and re-import some stuff. But take a look at this. It marks all these as new things because I'm going to start sharing all this stuff. And I have this little fat arrow that's on the top that's blue, which basically says, hey, you're ready, Tom, to put this up on the cloud. Let's do that together. So I'm going to put it up on the cloud. Let's do that. So I'm going to publish. And I'm going to say something like, you know, initialized Collab. And this is almost like a commit, kind of like a commit. I'm going to click Publish Now. And what this is going to do is going to package up my application the way it is and push it up into the cloud. Done. Nice and beautiful. It's integrated into Unity. It's a beautiful thing. I highly recommend it. And we're going to use it throughout the entire semester. Now, how does it work? I've just showed you how to push up. Who wants to share with me? Anyone volunteering to share with me? You want to do it? It's up to you. But your name is going to be up on YouTube. It's up to you. Whoever wants to do it with me. Because I'm going to share this stuff with everybody. Anyone volunteer? How about you? You're still what? All right. Okay, so what you need to do with me, if you're going to do this, is what I want you to do is, I need your Unity name. So in order for me to collaborate, take a look at this. When I clicked Collab, it actually created the Services folder. Take a look at this, the Services tab, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't have been there. If you don't have the Services tab and you want to do that, you can go to Window, and if you go to General, and if you go to Services, you can bring up that Services tab, and then you can park it over here. One thing the Services tab includes is this Go to Dashboard link right here. If I click Go to Dashboard, it's going to take me back to where we were before earlier, which is here. See here? Notice now I have both 1A and 1B. There's 1A and 1B, both projects. Okay? And you can see what's happened here. Analytics is turned on. I've got my Cloud Build turned on. I've got my Collaborate turned on, up online. And the most important part is down here in Settings. If I go to Settings, I want to include some users. Right now, the only user that's in my group is me. This is me, right? Okay, so come on down. Let's do this together. What is your username? And I mean that in terms of your email for user. No. Come down. By the time I spell it, it's going to take too long. So I'm sorry, but you're going to be online too. So here I have my my lovely assistant. Here we go.
That's my username, or does it? At the email.
gmail.com. Thank you so much. Excellent. Notice it says here that, take a look, it says also assign a Unity team seat to this user, and it'll ask you for that. If you don't have this, then what's going to happen is it might say add teams, right? I'm going to click add, and what this is going to do is it's going to add my friend here, right, onto my Unity account as a user. Okay, so this is interesting. Now, one thing I can't show you is what he's going to see, but we're going to start doing stuff together, right? Are you ready to go? Okay, so what I need you to do, this is the funny thing when you're recording this stuff, because I can't control what he's going to do. So it's random. It's like rolling the dice. All right, so here we go. So what I want you to do is this. I want you to close Unity down, and I want you to go into Unity Hub for a second. And I want you to close that down and restart it, please. And the reason why I'm asking this is because what it's going to ask you to do is it's going to say, hey, look, there's a new cloud project available. That's what's going to happen. Refresh. It's going to ask you to refresh at the bottom of the screen. Do you see that? So again, the ways you have to do it is this. Close Unity, close and restart Unity Hub. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Do you see refreshing the cloud? See the cloud project that's there? It should say, hey, there's new cloud projects available. Refresh on the bottom. Give it a sec. So, okay, so notice what I've seen. Well, I'm waiting for our friend to get it, right? I have this little, this little check mark here, right? And what I want to do, just for demonstration purposes, is I want to add in a 3D cube just to prove my point of there's no light. Okay, so again, I'm going to right-click here in the hierarchy, and I'm going to add a 3D object cube. And you can see that right there, it's completely black, right? Here's completely black. And if I go, why is it black? Because it's completely unlit, right? This is what it really looks like. And also, from a cube perspective, if I go to the inspector, it's not really centered. Let's center that so we can go to reset. So it resets the cube back to where it's going to be. And you can see now that the camera is right in front of the cube. Do you see it yet? Again, you have to, it's in Unity Hub. So you'd have to restart Unity Hub in order for you to see it. It takes a second. One thing I got to do is I want to push my project, I want to push my change up to Unity. Notice now that I've saved, I see that blue mark again saying, hey, I've added in a new asset cube, and I'm going to push it up. You see it? I'm going to push up, give me 1 second, I'm going to push up this new cube. So I'm going to say that added black cube, we'll call it, and then publish now. And what this is going to do is going to yet again publish another change up on Unity Collab. So you see it now? What you want to do is you want to download the project, that's right. And then when you download the project, what you're going to see is it's going to restart the project for you. And when you restart the project with Unity, it's going to install everything I've given you here. So here's what I want you to do. When you get Unity started and you see my black cube, the only way to see that, a lot of times what happens is when it starts Unity, you want to go to your scenes folder and double click on main, okay? When you finally load Unity up. And when you do that, you're going to see the cube. Now what I want you to do is make a change, please, and push it up to Unity the same way I just did. Okay, and then so we can see it here. And the only thing I want to show is what this looks like when you have this change come through and how fast the change happens. Because right now I've done 2 changes. By the way, just to give you another thing to note, if you look here, there's 2 parts. There's this and there's this, right? This is view history and this is invite teammate. Here I'm going to just view history. And if you notice here, I have a history of all my changes right here up on Unity. I can always go back to one of these 2 changes, one of these 2 states, which is kind of really cool and very easy to do. It also tells you how many assets and which assets were changed. Take a look. These are all the assets that were changed or updated. Okay? So really kind of cool. Are you done? Come on, man. What kind of computer do you have over there? All right. I got to bug you a little bit. Yeah, so right now what I'm running with, just for people that want to know, is, and again, I'm doing this because I'm running VR. If you have, in order for you to run VR, again, you should at least have a 1060. I recommend on i7, not on i5, right? If you're going to do VR at all, and at least myself, I think 16 gigs of RAM right now is minimal for Windows when you're doing that kind of stuff. My system's far beyond that. It's 9.9 with 32 gigs of RAM and a 1080. That's just me because I've got an Alienware M15R4. That's what I'm running right now. So, but the reason why I'm telling you this is I might be a little faster than you in terms of loading and all that kind of stuff. I also have an SSD and M2. Are you good there? Okay, so push a change, please. Sorry, I'm just trying to buy some time. It's always difficult when you're trying to do this kind of stuff because you can't see what he's seeing, right? So you can only see what I'm seeing, unfortunately. And if you push that change, it'll be on the top. As soon as you save, Control S, when you added something in, oh, take a look, it's right up here. That's how fast it is. So you can see that I have this little, I don't even know what he pushed, as long as there's nothing pornographic, right? Okay, all right, we're good. As long as there's nothing offensive, I'm okay there. Otherwise, I'm going to show it to YouTube, and I might be in trouble. So if you notice here, here's Collab. What I can do is it shows who did it. So here's Abdul. That's what he pushed, right? You can see that he said black square is a rectangle. What? Let's see what he did. So I'm going to update this now, and it says reload the scene, right? Now reload the scene means he's changed my atomic main scene. And now here's some challenges with this one. And I'm going to talk about this. If I reload the scene, what I'm saying is whatever he's done, I'm going to accept the changes. So if there's a risk that you guys are working on the same thing, The strategy that I've always used over the last year or so is duplicate your scene. If you duplicate your scene, you don't lose your changes, right? That's the trick, right? So if I reload, you can see now that he's done something totally different, right? And let's see what he's done. He's extended that thing into a rectangle, like he said. There it is. So he's actually done that change. And it happened immediately, guys. That's the beautiful thing about Collab. But it's not enough, right? I don't recommend just leaving it like this. I highly recommend when we go forward that we also use GitHub as well. Now, let's say I don't like his change. I don't like it. I say, what the heck did you do there? A rectangle. I wanted my cube. I can always go back. I can always go, here's his change. I can always go back to me. I can go back, click on go back, and you can see now that I've reverted back to what I had before. It's a wonderful process, and it's really quick and integrated into Unity. I highly recommend it. But again, you can always push back. So notice now I've done this, and if I push the Collab, that'll force you to either accept or reject my changes. Okay? So I need to use GitHub as well, and again, you guys said that you guys are good with GitHub. You've experienced with GitHub. Did you guys learn GitHub with command line, or did you use it with a tool? What was the thing you used? Like a UI?
I use GitKraken to use it. PowerShell, yeah.
GitKraken. And you use what?
PowerShell, no?
Sorry?
PowerShell?
PowerShell. That's the way to go.
Yeah.
I highly recommend command line. A tool, a UI on the front end, the problem with that is you don't know what's happening on the back end, right? And it's good to learn the commands from a low level, right? So, let's do it. Let's learn the commands, all right? So first of all, in order for you to use GitHub properly, what I highly recommend is close down Unity. You cannot do GitHub properly. You'll have some clashes without it. So let's exit Unity. Make sure you save, of course. And we don't need this anymore. This is just for demo purposes. So now we're back to this. So I've got my PowerShell. Now, I also like to use Visual Studio Code for editing in general. One thing I'd like to do with Visual Studio Code, I'm just going to bring in that project. And remember, we said it was on our desktop. We have on my desktop, I have a messy desktop. I have Unity projects. In there, I have lesson 1B that we just made. I'm going to drag and drop lesson 1B into Visual Studio Code, which is one of my favorite IDEs, actually editors. When I do that, you can see that it's got the structure of the project over here. I don't recommend Visual Studio for this. You can also use Atom or any of the other little editors that come out there. Visual Studio Code is free from Microsoft. Atom is a great one. So if you notice here, all I want to do here in my folder, you can also do this by command line, is if I add a new file, in my command line called .gitignore. My .gitignore file basically says, hey, which files or folders am I going to ignore from putting up on GitHub? And the main file, guys, that I highly recommend you ignore, main folder, is the library folder. If you put that up on GitHub, it will break more times than it won't. Alright? So that one and the builds folder. If you make special builds, for example, for Android or iOS, sometimes the builds get so large that there's files that are over 100 megabytes, so it's a large file size, and it'll stop your GitHub from working. So please do not include builds or the library folder. And the way to do that in gitignore is actually do something like this. You do slash, open square bracket, and in your gitignore file, you can put in something like capital L, lowercase l, close bracket, square bracket, library. So it's like library with two L's, right? And what this is doing, this is kind of like a regular expression that basically says, okay, I'm looking for anything that starts with L, uppercase or lowercase, and library. I'm closing that off like this. So any library folder will get ignored when they get put up in Collab. All this stuff, the solution file, .user, the Unity project file, all this stuff gets ignored. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing some of this, but the problem is sometimes what ends up happening is you don't get a workable project when you move it over with gitignore. So I recommend not putting anything else here. DSStore definitely is something you want to ignore because that's a Mac thing. That's OS, Mac OS generated. So that you can definitely ignore. Let's put that in the gitignore file. So anything that's like .DSStore, that's a Mac OS thing. So if you're a friend of yours is using a Mac and you're using a PC, you definitely don't want to include that stuff. Now, a funny thing with GitHub, GitHub will not put up empty folders. If you have a bunch of empty folders in your project, right now we do. We have the audio that's empty, materials that's empty, you know, and so on. They're all empty. And if you want to retain the same project structure because you want to make sure your friends who you're sharing with use the exact same structure as you, then you can use something called a git keep file. Let's do that. So git ignore and git keep. So in my assets folder, in my scripts folder, there's nothing in there, right? I don't have anything in my scripts right now. So I want to use a .git keep. Git keep. And the file is actually empty. As long as you include this git keep file, it'll put up this scripts folder into GitHub so you can retain your folder structure. Otherwise, it will not appear at all. So I'm going to copy this git keep and include it in animations, in audio, in materials, in models, in prefabs, in textures, all that stuff so I can retain my folder structure. That's what this is. And I'm going to save. Again, I'm doing this in an IDE, you can, or in an editor. You can do it anywhere you want. You can even do it on command line if you're good enough. I find this is far faster than doing it manually. And again, notice these metas. Leave these metas alone, man. People like to, you know, to move these metas around and take them out and all that kind of stuff. Meta files are used by Unity to set up objects inside of Unity. What this will do, it may cause Unity to reload or refresh everything, and it could appear differently for the person who's sharing with you. All right, so now that I've done this, and I've done this here, I can close down Visual Studio Code. I just wanted to use that quickly to create a structure that I wanted. So here is my lesson 1B, and what I want to do in my PowerShell, and again, you can use PowerShell or just even command line. One thing you need to do in order for you to get this going for Git itself is you need to download and install something called Git, actually. Most Windows machines do not include Git from as a default. So if you go to git-scm.com, you can download and install Git. Okay, this is where you get it from. So I highly recommend to do this because otherwise your Windows version will not have this working on command line by default. Okay, so if you download this for Windows. And again, here are the steps for downloading and installing Git. I'm not going to finish these steps because I'm already at, let me just check my version actually. So if I go git -- version, and if you try and do that with your command line, it says 2.22.0, and this is at 2.23.0. I mean, if I could update, and you know what, I'll just do it just for you. In order for you to update, make sure that all of your console windows are closed. If your console windows remain open, you will not update, and you will not add things to your computer, all right? So here's how you do it. Download 2.23.0 for Windows. If you have a Mac, by the way, Git is included by default. So let's download and install this thing. So here I'm downloading. And again, you can see that I've got, it's about 45 megabytes. And I'm going to run it. Now, there are some options that I recommend you run with this. So I'm going to click Next. Additional icons, I like to include Git Bash. I like Git large file system support. Sometimes I want to push a larger file than 100 megabytes. If it won't go within 100, it won't work. I don't want to check daily for Git for Windows updates though. That's one thing I don't recommend. That's a real pain. So please don't do this. But using a TrueType font is okay for console Windows. Next. Then what I want to choose is Visual Studio Code as Git's default editor. I think this is important to do. I don't particularly like Vim. Some people like Vim and Nano and a bunch of other stuff. I prefer Visual Studio Code, so that's why I'm using that. But you have to have Visual Studio Code installed in order for you to use that. And I'll give you the link for that later up on eCentennial. Next. Here I want to use, in this third screen, I want to use Git and optional Unix tools from the command prompt. I recommend this option here. Next. And then use the OpenSSL library. Next. Go to checkout Windows style, commit Unix style line endings. There. Next. And now if I go to command line, so I type in CMD and press enter, you can see now if I go to git -- version. If I actually can type, how about if I can type? Then I get 2.23.0 and I'm up to date with Git. Okay, so now that I can see this, by the way, if you don't see this window and if you see something like unrecognized command, what you need to do to fix this is fix your environment variables. Let's do that. So if I look at if I want to look at system settings, so if I want to look at environmental variables, actually let's look at environment variables. So I want to edit the environment system environment variables. Let's try that so it'll actually work, Tom. I think it's actually under advanced system settings. Let's try that. Advanced system. Here it is. View advanced system settings. This one you want to go to? Oh yeah, that's good. I like that. That's good that I don't have permission to do it. It's impossible, of course. Of course I have permission to do it. I'm just probably streaming right now, and that's probably why it's stopping me from doing it. But yeah, you go to advanced system settings, and then you can change your environment variables. You can add them in. So I can't do it right now. I will show it to you guys another day. But basically you go there, and what you do is you add the path for Git. Git establishes itself in different parts of your machine, and what it'll do is it'll allow you to add Git to the path. Okay, now that Git is part of my path, I'm going to go CD, and what I want to do is I want to kind of change my folder to the folder that I have Unity on, which is right here, lesson 1B. And drag this in, a drag and drop. And you can see that once I do that, I'm here in my Unity folder. I'm going to clear the screen, and I want to do my first command. So this is the first command for Git, git init. And what this does is it initializes my Git repository locally. Also notice, as soon as I do that, that this becomes a green check mark. Right? It just happens here in your Windows folder. So git init. And then what I want to do is git add dot. So again, git kraken or source tree do this in the background. Right? Git add dot. What git add dot does is it adds everything not marked by the .git ignore file to your local staging area. That's what it's called. And finally, for the local, I want to do a first commit. So I'm going to say git commit minus m for message, and then something like initial commit. And then what it's doing is, and this is where I want to check. I want to check to see that at no time do I have a library folder in here because I've ignored it, right? But notice also what it's doing. It's actually loading in audio, materials, prefabs, models, all the stuff that was empty before now is going to be put up because of my .gitkeep file. So now I've created my local repository. So again, there's two parts to Git in GitHub. Git creates a container, a repository local to you, and it's available to you in a hidden .git folder. Take a look. So if I look at my folder for my lesson, there's this hidden .git folder that is where everything is stored for Git. Okay? Now the only way I can see that is because I viewed files and folders. I don't hide any system files and folders, and that's why I see this. Otherwise, I wouldn't. Next, now that I've got it locally, I want to connect to the cloud. And the way to do that in this way is I'm going to go up to GitHub. And where is it? Here it is. And I'm using github.com/Centennial College. That's our link for GitHub. And what I want to do is I want to make a new repository here. So click New. And on GitHub, I'm going to make this new thing. I'm going to call it COMP305 in the fall 2019 semester. And it's going to be lesson 1B. And then press Enter. And once I do that, it creates a container from my repository. Notice that I have all the commands that I want right here. I can take these last two lines of code, which basically sets up a remote connection, names it origin, right, and connects to the master branch. Let's do that. Copy it. I'm going to go back to my command line and right-click and paste. And then when I press Enter, it's going to push my code up to GitHub. So those are the steps. I know that I went fast. I did record it, and I'm going to go over it again with you guys a little slower. I put together a little PowerPoint for you guys next week, so you can go through it if you need to. But I highly recommend using command line over using a tool for a couple reasons. One, more control. However, let me go back. I got to also claim, amnesty here because there's some, I got to put a disclaimer out. I think that's a better way to say it because there are some times where a tool helps, and one of the times it really helps is when you have a merge conflict. Merge conflicts happen a lot, especially with Unity when you're working with other people. Actually, anytime you use Git, and sometimes using something like Tortoise Git or Git Kraken or Source Tree or any of the other UI tools that are out there, even the one from GitHub really helps. And the one from GitHub can be found at desktop.github.com, and that's also a UI that GitHub itself produces for you. So any one of those is fine, and it really helps with merge conflicts. Okay, but otherwise, command line is perfectly fine and really fast when it comes to pushing up things up on GitHub. Questions around Git and GitHub. So I use Collab and GitHub together. And the reason why I'm doing that, and by the way, one more thing that I do as a backup, because I'm a nervous guy when it comes to my code, especially when it's a commercial application that I'm making, I also take a piece of code that I know I have a good release. For example, let's say, for example, I've made a great alpha release 01, okay, and it works completely. I take it, copy it, and put it onto Google Drive as well as GitHub, as well as Collab. Why? Because sometimes, my friends, when you work together with somebody else, they corrupt your Collab, they corrupt your GitHub. Bad things happen, and you don't want to lose your code base, right? Now, a lot of times what you want people to do is work in their own branch, but sometimes it doesn't happen. You may not have somebody who knows how to use GitHub, and they can break the build. So I like to put another build as a backup aside somewhere else where I can always recover and get it back. Okay, so like those 3 ways, I'm kind of nervous about that kind of stuff, and that's what I do. Okay, so we talked about project management tools and Unity. I got to talk about one more thing, because you're producers. There's a producer on your team, and I want you guys to track your projects. So there's a few ways to track your projects. I'll talk about the lowest level first. The lowest level to track your project is using GitHub, actually. GitHub has a built-in project management software, and I'll talk about this. Let's go to github.com and /Centennial. So again, I've got these 2 repositories. Let's go to this one. And notice that when I go to this one, I have this thing called projects. So under projects, you can actually create a new project. And in projects, you can create something called a Kanban board. Let's just do that together. So create project. And let's say I'll call this project board name something like, Unity intro, right? And notice I'm going to create the project. And what it does is I can add a bunch of columns, just like a Kanban board. Now, if you've never seen a Kanban board, think about it as a bunch of empty columns. Anyone not know how to use a Kanban board? Or what even is a Kanban board? It's okay if you don't know, right? Because think about this. You get a bunch of columns, right? Each column represents something. So let's make the columns. These are the ones I recommend minimum. By the way, you don't have to do it this way, and I'll show you 2 other tools that I highly recommend. So here's GitHub. Add a column. The first column that I want to add is called backlog. And we'll talk about what a backlog is. Think about the backlog as every possible feature of your game from now and for the entire length of the project from now until the end of semester. What could they be? You can add in a bunch of different cards or notes. So each one of the features you can list here. Okay? And then I'm going to have another column for to do. Right? My to do column. It could also be the release column. By the way, you can say current release. Remember, we talked about the release as we're going to use agile project management, which we build up on a code base. So we start with a base project, and what we do is we iterate, we change stuff, we add things, and we do several releases. The first release for you guys is going to be the first playable, right? So imagine if I have my backlog, but only for the first playable release, I want to pass in some items that I want to put on the backlog over here. So I'm going to put them inside this to-do column. So imagine now you're a software engineer and you want to pull one of these features and work on it. Well, you need another column for that. And we're going to use a column called in progress. So the in progress column, you pull from the to do column to the in progress column. That basically signifies that you're working on that feature. All right? And then you have a testing column. The testing column basically does this. It says, okay, so I'm in progress. I think I'm done. I'm going to put it into the testing column. And that means someone else, like a QA person or another person from your team, looks at the feature and says, yes, it works, approved. When it's approved, then you drag it into the last column, which is the done column. Okay? The done column says that that particular feature is over. It's been done and implemented. There's one other column I'd like to use in addition to this, which is the blocked column. Okay? And I use blocked because sometimes you think you can do something and you try it out and it doesn't work, or you run out of time and you can't get that feature done and you put it there. Okay? Sometimes we recycle the block column back into our backlog. Sometimes what we do with it is we put it, it's almost like a parking lot of things we can't do or features we'd like to add that we just can't get to. okay? But that's what I like to do. You can also reorganize these columns. Like right now we have columns like this. Sometimes what I want to do is put the block column before the done column so you can see that I can move things around. The really good thing about GitHub when you use project management for GitHub, it incorporates well into its issue system. So you create an issue, and what ends up happening is you can include it here as an item. Let's show you what I'm talking about here. So let's suppose I want to make some items. Let me go to issues. So here's my issues, right? Think about issues as a feature that I'm going to add in, or it could be a bug, it could be a fix, it could be something that I want to add in. So example, the first thing I've asked you to do is make a start page, and the start page or the start scene might have some kind of menu, right? And a lot of times what we want to do is write it from a user perspective, and we write it like this. As a user, I would like to be able to start my game by pressing the start button. It could be something like that, all right? A lot of times I might write a new issue that looks like this. Need a start button for the start menu, right? And then take a look at this on the side here. I have assignees. I can assign somebody. If I collaborate, you can collaborate with more than one person on GitHub. I also have something called labels, projects, and a milestone. For now, let me just submit my issue by itself. So here's I'm submitting my issue. And if I look at issues, I got one issue right now. It says need a start button for a start menu. Sometimes I want to change my labels. So it has, GitHub gives you some basic labels. For example, they give you things like bug, enhancement, and so on. But I also like to add in things like feature. So I'm going to make a new label. I'm going to call it feature or new feature. There it is. And I can also change the color. Let's say here's my new feature label. I'm going to create that label. And then I can add other things. Here's another label. And I can call this, you know, I can add priority labels. So this is like low priority, right? And let's make low priority. Yeah, sure, that's good. And let's add another label. And let's call this medium priority. Now you can see I got some customization to do, guys, right? And finally, I'm going to add another one called high priority. So why would I do this? Because I can prioritize each of my features. High priority. Let's change the color so that it is like red. By the way, if you like a certain color, you can put it in, or you can put it in a custom color. Wonderful. So I've got all these labels here like this. And the other thing I like to do is I want to establish milestones. So what milestones are like your releases. So here's milestones. I can make a new milestone. Let's just call this first playable release. There's a milestone. And I can make a due date if I want. I'm going to create that milestone. Okay, cool. So I've got a first playable release milestone and a bunch of labels, and now I've also got this project. Let's go back to the issues though. So under issues, I've got this one issue. I can go back into the issue and classify it. Take a look. I can do this. I can say that, from a labels perspective, this would be a new feature, right? And it's probably going to be, I mean, if I'm working on my start scene, that's the first thing I'm going to work on. It might be medium to high priority. So let's make it high priority for now. I'll click away. And notice now that it's got these two things associated with the issue. Kind of cool, right? And then what I can do is I can associate it with the first playable. I can click on milestone, click on first playable release, and now you can see that my issue has been associated with my first playable release. By the way, my issue number is issue number 1. And then I can also associate my projects. I can say, well, this is part of this Unity intro project that I'm working on. Yay. And click away. So now what happens is if I go back to my projects, you can see that under projects, in my board, I have this open issue, right? And I can put it where I want. Like this whole thing should be over here in my backlog. So this is how issues work. I have an issue that I've kind of put together. And when let's suppose that me and Josh are working on it here, right? And Josh, he's the guy that wants to work on the button. So what he's going to do is going to take this issue and he's going to say, Tom, I'm ready to work on it. So he pulls it into to-do that day, right? Yay. So now that it's in to-do, it keeps track of it. Inside the issue, it has a narrative that keeps track of what you're doing with this thing. So now it's in release. He works on it for a couple days. Actually, let's if it's Josh, from what it sounds like, he works on it in like a day, as an example, right? And then he's like, you know what? I'm pulling it into in progress. It's pretty quick, right? And then what he says is, you know what, Tom, I think I'm done. Can you check it out? So he puts it into testing. All right, so I test it out. I think I like it. Right? And then what I do is I put it into done. That's project management for you. And that's how we do it when it comes to Agile. It's very, very simple. You have a bunch of stuff going on, and once we put it into done, we can close off this issue, right? There's two ways to close this off. You can close it manually, or you can do a commit and mention this closes issue #1, and it'll automatically close it for you, all right, in your commit. So it's really, really cool, and it's integrated nicely with GitHub. So this is the lowest level project management that you can go, okay? And this is free. There's nothing for you to buy or anything, and it's included in your GitHub repo anyway, okay? Let's talk about one more way, or two more ways. One way that I recommend, and again, is Trello. Trello is, again, for small teams. It does all the boards for you already. You can select stuff. It's free. It's a great little tool. I highly recommend Trello if you don't want to spend any money, and it's already pre-organized for you. It also has plugins that you can pay for to connect to GitHub and all kinds of other stuff, okay? So Trello would be like level 2. Here's level 3, and I highly recommend you just do this. Jira. Jira is the de facto standard for Agile project management, at least for the people that use it in game development. If you want to put something good on your resume, Jira is the thing to put on your resume. However, it is not free. By the way, Trello and Jira are owned by the same people, Atlassian, that own Bitbucket, right? So they kind of offered Trello as a freemium way of kind of getting into Agile project management, which is really good actually. A lot of mobile development teams use Trello. But I think Jira, from a resume building perspective, might be even better. It costs $10 a month for 10 users to use it, and it is amazing. It's absolutely amazing in terms of the functionality that it has. Now, I'm not going to spend the rest of my time with you talking about Jira, but if you want to check out something and you want to push yourself to be even better, Jira is the way to go. It gives you all those tools. You can set up all the columns. It has total control. It'll email you when changes are made. When someone pulls it off, if, like, for example, one issue is completed, it'll automatically email everybody who's watching that board, that particular board. And a board is the Kanban board that we're talking about, right? It'll email everybody. You can have watchers, people that aren't even working on the project, like your manager that looks at it and so on. Ubisoft uses Jira. RBC and all the big banks use Jira, all right? And there's nothing wrong with learning it. So please, if you do yourself a favor, if not in this project, in another project before you finish with Centennial, pick up Jira, learn it. I think it's a good tool to learn. Okay? Questions around project management tools. So again, there's nothing wrong with using GitHub. A lot of people like it because it's very simple. I think it's good because it's integrated here in right here in your project. It's good and it works fine. You can make as many issues as you want. Here's some more issues examples that you can use. So here's one issue. Notice that it's open. Also notice when you look at it from a milestone perspective, you can see that it's 0% complete, right? If I had 10 issues and I completed 3 of them, it would be 30% complete, right? And actually shows you how complete the first playable is. So it gives you kind of a instant look, a dashboard of how your first playable is going. At the same time, you can have multiple milestones that you're working on at the same time, right? Something else that you're working on, maybe a bug fix milestone or something else. Not really a release, but yet, some kind of bug fix because you have some bugs that you got to, remove from your code. Okay, and that is really project management in a nutshell. So let's stop it there for today, right? What I want to talk about is what we've learned, right? Again, it being not a Unity course. Remember that next week when we get together, you have your contract. Your contract is going to be due next week by midnight, right? So Saturday by midnight. Now, between now and next week, my recommendation is get together with your team, start thinking about your concept, because week 2 we're going to be concepting your game, whatever that is, right? So get together with your team. I'm going to be tracking your attendance next week as a bonus, right? So please come on time like you did today, right? And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to give you a bonus when it comes to your contribution throughout the week. So when you connect with your other team members, if you were here, you're going to get a bonus for that, okay? And this will give you a chance to improve your mark from a mark improvement perspective over time. Also be more useful for your team members. And that's what we're working on. Next week, just as a heads up, and again, if I look at that document that we were working with before, so I'm just going to go back to my documents, because I always want to try and keep you guys on track. So, there you go. I'll be okay. So I want to keep you guys on track. So when you look at your document, the one we were looking at before, and again, I've also put up the official outline up online for you guys to look at. It's going to change 100%, right? Because it needs to change. But let's take a look at that final project overview one more time. So again, if you look at the final project overview, we're going to take this exercise where it says environment setup, and the reason why I'm waiting for it to be done next week is because A, there's 9 people missing. A. B, I'm going to actually give you something to put up on GitHub and Collab next week. So right now you have nothing. I mean, really, we're just talking about environment setup and your teams and everything else. So I'm going to move this to next week. You need your team contract by next week, and then you're going to be given 2 things. You're going to be given the details for assignment number 1. That's coming up next week. And the other thing you're going to be given is the things that you need for week 3, which is your game pitch. Now, during your game pitch, I want to talk about this. You're going to be giving me a pitch of your concept. One thing I do not want is a business professional pitch. I don't want that. It's a game you're pitching, so I want less words. I don't want walls of text. Walls of text for a game pitch, no good, guys. I want a nice project or a PowerPoint presentation that has more graphics, and it's going to talk about things like your concept, your inspiration for the kind of game you want to make, who your team members are, and all this kind of stuff is going to be detailed or is already detailed in this document right here. If you look further down, you're going to see what's coming up. So team contract is 1, but down here you're going to see game pitch and game design document, which is coming up for week 3. So you know what's coming. If you have any questions throughout the week, please shoot me an email. I haven't established a Slack channel right now or a Discord for the class. I may do that starting next week, only because this week not everybody's here, and next week hopefully we'll have more of our players in class. Otherwise, guys, thank you so much for coming out and attending. I will see you all next week.